Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Dope, an online travel business magazine dedicated to the cause of sustainability and also to bring you local, international, and topical news that you can use in your daily businesses in the travel industry. The idea is to encourage and to nudge all of you to start thinking about sustainability as a front-forward strategy when you start looking towards travel in its entirety once again post-pandemic. Today we have with us Jos Vranken. I hope I said that right, Jos?
You did. Thank you.
Yeah. The very articulate, we've been chatting away, the very articulate MD of NBTC Holland Marketing. Very interesting personality who's joined the NTBC way back in 2007, and to my mind, he's literally formulated what Holland tourism stands for today. Welcome on the show, Jos, and it's absolutely my pleasure to be chatting with you. Let's just dive right in, Jos, because my impression of Netherlands tourism is that y'all have steadily since I think early 2000 started to envisage a strategy that really looks at sustainability not only in the arena of tourism, but the government as such is very focused on sustainability. Also because as a country, you're a very small country and you are actually reclaimed from the waters, right? So can we begin by talking about the country and about its creation and why sustainability is so important?
Yeah, thank you, Shoba. I'm honored and privileged to be part of this movement and to be invited by you to contribute. So thank you for that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if you look at this subject, you may have to go back to the very, very beginning of our country. You said it quite rightly that we reclaimed our country, most of it at least, from the water, from the sea, and later on from the rivers. And sustainability, therefore, I guess for the Dutch is slightly more of a holistic approach, not necessarily just focusing on, let's say, the ecological side, but also on the social side, and to a certain extent also the economic side, because to be able to live and work and operate in a country with limited resources, where we continuously have to keep the water out, live together, work together on a small scale, I would say almost by default requires a sustainable way of living, because otherwise we would be fighting each other all the time or over the resources that are available. So I guess you could see that as a part of a more holistic approach to sustainability. And for us, therefore, it's vitally important to ensure also that we will still be sustainable in the future, both as a country and, of course, from my personal perspective, also as a destination.
Lots of lessons to be learned, I guess, for even, that Bombay is also reclaimed from the sea. I read about you taking over in 2007, and transformation was one of it said breaking down, building, and transformation was the route that you took, right? So what was it before you started this whole process of relooking, of rephrasing your tourism model towards a more sustainable model?
Well, we were quite fortunate, to be honest, that about 2 years before COVID hit the world that we had started a process that was called Prospective 2030. And Prospective 2030 represents, let's say, a co-created vision and ambition for Destination Netherlands in the future. And what it showed when we went through this process with public and private stakeholders and with the educational institutions, that out of all these talks and meetings, really a few new paradigms came up. You could argue, say, we were talking about genuine paradigm shifts that should decide on how we deal with tourism in the future compared to how we dealt with tourism in the past. And one of these paradigm shifts, I'll give you two, really relied to the whole phenomenon of sustainability. One is to look beyond economy and economic impacts, but really start looking at balancing out the economic impacts, the ecological impacts, and social impacts. So have a more like a 360-degree approach to tourism rather than a single-minded sectoral approach. And the second one, also to do with sustainability, but more with social sustainability, I guess, is also balancing out the interests of the businesses, which always were at the forefront, but also the interest of the citizens, the community members, and of course the visitors themselves. And finding a balance based on shared interests from these stakeholders rather than the interest of the tourism sector alone. So it's two balancing acts, if you like, balancing the interests of the stakeholders and balancing the impacts of tourism and travel. And those are, they seem so logical, if you talk about it.
Yes, absolutely.
But they are being seen and regarded as true paradigm shifts in how to look at tourism, how to think about tourism, and how to deal with tourism the next few decades compared to the decades before.
So this period for you up to 2030 is the period of transition when you're putting one after the other, you're putting them into practice.
Yeah, we felt before COVID, we always have to smile in the office a little bit about that, because it sometimes felt like missionaries. You know, you go out with your Prospective 2030 under your arm, and you go out into the country and you start to talk about Prospective 2030 and the paradigm shifts, and that if we would like to have a sustainable future as a destination, or rather as a place where people love and to live and to work, a place where visitors feel welcome and where businesses can flourish, then we need to act in a different manner than we did before. We truly believe so. And we went out there and talked to provinces, talked to municipalities, talked to their marketing bureaus, entrepreneurs, others, and stimulating them, seducing them to start thinking along those lines. And so it goes for us, because of course we can't go out there preaching about Prospective 2030 and not changing our own way of working too. So it also applies to us. And the good news is we now, 2 years down the line, before COVID hit, we really saw that Prospective 2030 was starting to become the guiding principle for many places in the Netherlands on how they are designing their future tourism strategies, which is fantastic. But then, of course, COVID hit and put up a whole new challenge for the industry as a whole.
So once you have that vision of 2030 in front of you, so as a tourism body, I know that. So you went about talking to the stakeholders, the tourism stakeholders within the country. Now, how does that translate as for the travelers who are coming in? Because any protocol or any regulation is as good as what the traveler will accept, right? So how did that pan out where the travelers were concerned?
Yeah, I mean, to think out loud with you, arguably saying, I would say for travelers, it's key that they feel welcome, that they feel appreciated, and that they go home with a wonderful experience that will create a lasting memory forever. That's what you want. But in order to be able to do so, I think in many ways we need to change our tune, because as you know, before COVID, the whole over-tourism debate popped up, in some places more than others, of course. But we saw even places where there was no over-tourism at all before COVID, that nevertheless, policymakers, politicians, for example, start to use the word because they may not have over-tourism, but they were afraid that they would get over-tourism. So we really felt that if we want to ensure that memorable, lasting experience and ensuring that people will still feel welcome in, let's say, 10, 20 years' time, knowing that the world will keep traveling, I'll come back to COVID, I'm sure, later on, that we need to ensure that the shared interests are being the driving factor, and that we have to balance out these various impacts. And how will travelers then experience that or notice that? Well, hopefully, for one, because they feel welcome, they don't feel pushed out, or they don't feel that they're being regarded as an alien that sort of enters the community space of the citizens, and that they actually do go home with a wonderful, memorable experience. But most of all, that they experience the Netherlands in an authentic way, because we truly believe that sustainability as a destination is also to ensure, if you put the community in the central position and you look at what the identity and the DNA of a community is and how you can cultivate that, then the last thing you should do, in our opinion, is to add things to that community that have nothing to do with the identity or the DNA, and therefore not being regarded by the citizens as being also theirs. They will never embrace that. But if it's being done solely to attract visitors, it will never work. So whatever you do in the future as a place, as a city, as a region, in terms of visitor management and development, ideally it should be something which is also relevant and important to the citizens, because then it will create that balance, but it also ensures that the authenticity of the place, its identity, will remain as it is, rather than people feel alienated about the place where they live because they don't recognize anymore the things that are happening in their community.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, their roads being taken over, their public areas being taken over by people. I mean, that just generally, because like you rightly said, that the first right to a city or a country is for its residents. And tourism only in so far as providing positive impact, it has to work around that, and has to take its experience from what exists rather than what they wanted to change to, right? Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I keep talking about this again and again, that the first the first and foremost beneficiary of any tourism activity is the destination itself. and the second is, of course, the host community. So I absolutely
Yeah,
agree.
exactly. And I think I told you a little bit about these two paradigm shifts in Perspective 2030. A third one was looking at tourism not necessarily just as a goal in itself. Of course, it has tremendous value, literally and figuratively speaking. So it is worthwhile developing tourism in many regions or cities. However, the paradigm shift stated that it's interesting to also look at tourism as a mean to various ends. Because we see a lot of regions, even on a small scale in the Netherlands, there's huge differences between economic regions that are communities that are very economically sound and strong, and communities that are facing shrinkage in terms of people leaving the communities, going to the cities, amenities decreasing, facilities decreasing, public transportation decreasing. So if you then look at the visitor economy, then you can also look, how can the visitor economy contribute to other challenges, other interests of a certain community? And of course, the interests and the goals of each community differ, because one community is maybe very different from another. But if you look at the challenges of a certain community, and then it was interesting to also look at tourism as a way to contribute to those challenges. So then tourism is not a goal in itself, but it becomes a valuable mean to different ends. And that is quite an interesting development that is now taking place. Early days, I have to admit, but it's certainly a road that we're confidently walking.
I understand what you're saying, but could you give us an example of this particular paradigm shift that you're talking about?
Definitely.
This paradigm,
one of the most documented examples is, for example, you probably are aware of a small village in the eastern part of the Netherlands called Giethoorn. It's a very picturesque place where a lot of Chinese visitors go to. And they go by train, most of them, or a lot of them. And then they take a bus from the train station to this small village. And the bus company keeps on telling us that the only reason why this bus line is still running, moreover, why they could increase the frequency of the bus line, which was unheard of. Most bus lines in the countryside are decreasing. This bus line actually increased. The only reason for that was that Chinese visitors use that bus line next to the people that live in the village. So in other words, purely based on the usage by the citizens, this bus line would have been stopped. But because of the visitors, this bus line can keep running, and it allows school children from the village to go to school in the city. So this is a perfect example where visitor economy can contribute to a basic facility for this local community.
Fantastic. That was really well explained, Jos. And one of the most simplest things, I guess, when you are explaining about how tourism can actually contribute to the well-being of the local community. Really.
Of course, and of course, don't get me wrong, it doesn't dismiss the stakeholders in and around the community to also discuss on how to mitigate the downside of the influx of visitors, because it's all about that balancing act that we talked about before. There's good things, there's bad things, and to get the stakeholders together should really work on this desired balance. But it's good to address the fact that tourism really can contribute to other challenges in communities, just that it's more than just the tourism spend and income for the tourism businesses. It can be so much more powerful than sometimes the debate reflects.
I mean, it's a very simple but a very very precise example of what you have quoted just now. So when we look at tourism to Netherlands, so what are your I mean, is it cultural tourism? What is the tourism about? What do travelers come there to see and experience?
Well, to answer that, you have to sort of look at our visitor mix, if you like. Who's visiting the Netherlands at the moment? And for us, the domestic market is of key importance, and that's a mixed bag, because the Dutch they do all kinds of things. So many people, so many wishes and desires, and they flock out throughout the country. If you look at the inbound market, there are distinct differences, because for us the German market is by far the most important, and their prime reason to travel is our coastal region and water in general. So the coast, number one, but also the water sports areas, the lakes, for example. That's the key reason to travel. There's many more, but this one stands out. The other one is our traditional icons, the tulips, spring tourism, the flower fields, the Keukenhof flower garden, the whole tulip and flower experience is a big one. Our arts and culture is a big theme. We have, of course, famous painters like Rembrandt and Van Gogh, and Vermeer and so on and so forth. So that's a big theme. And of course, city breaks. So the short city breaks, with Amsterdam being, of course, the prime destination, but also cities like Rotterdam see a growing interest, also inbound. So those are a couple of main drivers. And what we try to do is create almost new reasons to travel. Design and architecture, for example, are key areas for development, with cities like Eindhoven, which is really sort of the design center of the Netherlands, but also Rotterdam, as I mentioned before, great architecture, very compelling and daring. So we also, apart from the let's say the organic reasons to travel or traditional reasons to travel, we also try to redirect and divert future travelers with different reasons to travel. Cycling, we mentioned it already,
Yes.
of course key, but it's not necessarily a reason to travel as such, but it's a means of transportation if you go to the coast, or if you go to our museums, or if you go to our cities. Cycling may not necessarily be the main reason to travel, but it's an integral part of the experience that you'll have.
Absolutely. And do you, Rotterdam, I remember once that there was a large MICE conference by SITE in Rotterdam. And I remember Rotterdam keeps coming up when in SITE meetings, when the Indian MICE operators talk about their trip to Rotterdam and how wonderful it was. So is MICE tourism also a big part?
Yeah, absolutely. The key reasons to travel I mentioned are very much the leisure-driven reasons, but of course the C in our name stands for conventions. So for us, MICE, very important. To give you an idea of all international guests, about a third is business travelers, and of that third, about a quarter is meetings or conventions. Now that may seem a relatively modest share, but they have a few characteristics that make them very worthwhile. One, we bring together influencers, opinion leaders, scientists, sector leaders on the topics and the themes that we feel are important to the Netherlands as a whole, sectors that the Netherlands would like to position themselves with or excel in. So then it's great to have mice as a catalyst to get these people around the world together in your country around that theme and bring them together for a few days. So it adds to the credibility of the Netherlands in that particular domain. The other one is they seem to absorb pretty nicely in their temporary host environment. They absorb well in their temporary environment and therefore contributing to the balance between citizens and visitors. And lastly, their economic impact is tremendous. Although their numbers may be smaller, their spend is about, on average, 3 times the average leisure visitor. So a lot of reasons why mice for us is also of key importance.
I read somewhere that the word pleasure was actually originated in Netherlands.
Is it? Well, yeah. It makes sense because it's we're, as you know, Holland or the Netherlands is an externally orientated country, because we're small and our position in the world also economically it has come from the fact that we have an open and international outlook, because if we don't, we become very narrow-minded and small and negligible, and it means that therefore the basis for this mice development is also, of course, our very strong international trade and industry position, because that brings a lot of international activity. So yeah, I guess leisure and business easily blends in the Netherlands.
Absolutely. So Prospective 2030, and today we are sitting in 2020, and I don't think you will call it a lost year in your pursuit, in your focus towards Prospective 2030. However, I mean, till 2019 or till early 2020, how was the progress? I mean, how would you rate your progress to your final to your perceived goal for 2030? Well, so where were you? Basically, where do you think you were, and how was it working out? And
Yes, well, I think to be fair, the Prospective 2030 came out late 2018, so we had about a year and a half until COVID hit the markets to spread the word and to see how we can get it rooted into our communities, our provinces, our cities, within entrepreneurs. We made good progress to the extent where we actually seeing today, regardless of COVID, that Prospective 2030 has really become sort of the guiding principle of regions and communities throughout the Netherlands. There's many more that need to be worked on, but there's some provinces or cities that literally take the parameters of Prospective 2030 and apply it to their future tourism strategies, which is fantastic to see. But like you said, COVID hit the market and it brought quite a few things to standstill. However, because that question is being asked a lot, of course, does it make Prospective irrelevant? And our answer is no, it's more important than ever, because Prospective 2030 never was a plan. It was not an activity plan. It was a vision and ambition based on paradigm shifts that are necessary to maintain a sustainable and vital destination in 10, 20 odd years. And we see COVID as a massive crisis. It's comparable to previous crises. I've seen a few in my life as a MD of NBTC, but this one is really off the chart. However, our belief is that once a vaccine or remedy hits the market, once COVID disappears to the background, the market dynamics are so strong, both among consumers, in the world, I'm talking globally here, people want to travel, they want to explore, they want to meet, they want to open up opportunities, business-wise or leisure-wise. They want to learn about the world, they want to have memorable experience. That's a very powerful driving force. Together with businesses who want to welcome guests again, we feel that on the long run, there's an upward trend in terms of global travel. And that means that COVID creates a massive gap and dip, and it may last longer than anyone would have liked to see. But if you take this, then I would say working with the stakeholders towards a balanced, sustainable future, I would say is more relevant than ever. Just the growth path and the speed of the growth path has changed dramatically. But the principles behind Prospective 2030 are more alive than ever, I would say.
One of the last things that I wanted to ask you was, okay, is India on your radar? And so that's have you been marketing to India? Because I don't know, I might be wrong because I don't do outbound too much, but from my perspective of what I see presented for tourism from tour operators and other people from India too. So it's always the flowers, the flower fields, and of course that became very popular in the 80s with one famous movie being shot here, and of course the windmills. Of course, that typically when you do, these are the two things that come to mind. But have you all? Do you see progress in the Indian travelers? Do you see? Have you been able to break into the mindset where you can sustainability experience can also be sustainable? Have you been able to break into that mindset?
For that, I need to go one step back in the sense that when we looked at our markets a few years ago as part of Prospective, we made a few decisions, including the Indian market, because until 2018-19, we were marketing the Netherlands in India. We used a partner to do so. And we've done that for a number of years, where we found that it was quite tough to break through the iconic interests, which, don't get me wrong, it's an integral part of our destination and it's vitally important. But it's also very much an integral part of people's perception and images of the Netherlands. So it's hard to break through. But due to Prospective 2030 and due to budget limitations and restrictions, we had to make a few tough calls. And they involved ceasing our operation in, for example, Brazil, and in Russia, in Indonesia, but also in India. So we had to cease our operation, which is a pity because we had a strong partnership with Schiphol Airport and with KLM, who at the time also had a partnership with, of course, Jet Air, which is now no longer operational, of course. So we had to cease the operation, which was a pity. But at the same time, it means that we also felt that with the money and the budget available, but also at the task at hand, it was just, we were scratching the surface. And it's simply not enough to really make a difference in such a huge market that is India. So we decided to rather focus and concentrate our resources to a limited number of countries who make up for the majority of our international visitors, then spread out our budgets too thinly over too many markets. And unfortunately, India was the victim of that decision. So that's the story that sums up our relationship with India at the moment when it comes to destination marketing and management.
Yeah, but you do see people. I mean, I do see Netherlands being still being promoted by tour operators here. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, we are very grateful for the fact that our partner in India, who took care of this on our behalf, and the partners within the industry that were built up and developed and over the years, that they are incredibly loyal to the Netherlands. And it's not, I think they and we recognize the opportunities. But the fact is that can you effectively support that or not? The decision was not or not enough.
Yeah.
But we're very grateful for the fact that so many partners are nevertheless incredibly loyal to the country and therefore still driving business to the Netherlands. So hopefully at some point in the future we can resume our activities fitting the parameters of Prospective 2030, but also allowing sufficient funds to support the partners in the marketplace.
And it seemed to have worked for you because you literally concentrated a lot on the countries around you, and you said Germany is one of your prime promoters for you. I mean, one of your prime destination for you, from where you get the maximum of your
No,
travelers.
Absolutely, and they spread out. There's like we talked about mice before. The characteristics of the German market, for example, are key to the Netherlands and to our Prospective 2030 ambition.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the large numbers. It helps, of course, but they travel fairly independently. So it means they travel in small groups of as couples or families. So they absorb well in their temporary host environments. They are very polite. I'm generalizing, of course, because there's also, of course, the other side. But in general, they're very polite. They're welcomed by the communities and the businesses. But also, they have such a good knowledge about the Netherlands that they travel well beyond the hotspots. So they've seen the hotspots, they've done it, they ticked the bucket list, and they travel also off the beaten track. So for us, that's vitally important because it means that they can contribute to the challenges of certain communities that are completely forgotten by other source markets because they tend to limit their visits to the hotspots. So it's an important market, and you're right, we decided to focus on that for now because they seem to fit the ambition slightly better than thinning out our funding and our efforts over too many markets without having a material effect.
Yeah, and it seems to mitigate over tourism by helping you distribute your travelers to various corners of the country. I like that. I mean, it seems like a very sensible strategy, especially when you're looking at sustainability as one of your core principles for your Prospective.
Yeah, all the markets we focus on at the moment, with the exception of the US, for example, because of the mice market.
Yes,
US is vitally important, but most markets that we focus on can reach the Netherlands by either car or train. Which is, of course, also vitally important, looking for a more sustainable way of travel and transport. And combine that with the cycling and the e-bike, which is taking off. It means that people can not only reach the Netherlands in a more sustainable way, but also travel around in a more sustainable way. So at the end of the day, that all helps to maintain the balance between economic, ecological, and social impact. That's what we really strive for.
Yeah, that was really wonderful, Jos. I mean, I can't tell you how wonderful it was talking to you, and your insights and your sharing of Perspectives 2030 is personally for me, it is very encouraging and insightful, because I sit on board a lot of responsible tourism initiatives in India, and it is a personal learning for me, because some of our thoughts align very well. And really congratulations, and I really hope the COVID is behind all of us. And
Well, likewise, it was a pleasure of being your guest, and I guess I support you in your final statement that, let's say, for the sake of not just the tourism sector, but also for citizens all over the world, that we can leave COVID behind us sooner rather than later, because one, we don't want to talk about all these beautiful futures and realize that it becomes very hypothetical because nothing happens. But most of all, because, let's face it, sometimes in all these debates, we seem to forget the true beauty and value of what travel represents. And that's meeting wonderful people in other parts of the world, connecting and learning about other cultures, creating memorable experience with your loved ones. And let's hope, for everyone's sake, that that can return sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, absolutely. And of course, though it can be done on, we've kind of mastered the art of doing this virtually, but one-on-one, looking into each other's eyes and probably giving a warm hug can really never replace anything else. Thank you so much, Jos. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and good luck, and hopefully see you in the foreseeable future.
Yes, see you in the foreseeable future. Thank you, Jos. Thank you, Elsie, for helping us sort this out. And for everybody who is listening, please join us in our endeavor to make travel sustainably, and also to endeavor to promote sustainable travel, so that the industry as such can be looking at, just like Jos has said, we can all be guided by what the planet and people would be appreciating, rather than just a very narrow business strategy. Please share, please like the interview. Please share it generously, because in sharing all, like Jos has generously shared his vision for Netherlands with us. It's in sharing generously that we will all be looking towards a future that we can leave as bright and green for the future generations. Thank you so much.